The veil between life and death was so thin I could see my fingers, hand, and arm all the way to my elbow through its mist. I pulled back, then thrust my arm forward again, proving I could move both ways, yet I was reluctant to commit to either, and so the veil remained intact with my arm on one side and the rest of me on the other. The trouble was figuring out which side I should be on. Fire raged just beyond my fingers, while the rest of me existed in a chilling, shadowed darkness. I flinched as my fingertips got way too warm. Was that side hell? Was I dead and going to suffer in brimstone and fire for eternity? I wasn't a saint, but hell? My head ached with indecision. I tried peering into the mist that grew thicker the longer I stared. Indistinct shapes wavered against an orange glow in the distance. The figures moved between the night shadows and the flickers of yellow and orange. I couldn't make out who they were or if Alex was one of them. He approached me from behind, soft as a whisper on the wind. I sensed Alex before I saw him and sank into his embrace with immense relief. My arm was still outstretched in the mist. He smiled down at me, and his touch was electrifying. He placed something round and cool in my free hand and curled my fingers over the tiny object, which got warmer the longer I held it. "Find me when you can, sweet love," he said. He pushed me toward the fire. I opened my mouth to shout to him, to ask what he was doing, but nothing came out. My breath caught in a tight spasm as I hurtled forward, while the man I loved faded from view. The heat grew painful, and I wanted nothing more than to return to the cool, black chasm of space where Alex remained. "Janda!" Mother's deep voice rose above the crackle and boom of exploding wood. I didn't want to hear him. I wanted Alex. I instinctively snatched my fingers from flames licking my flesh and opened my eyes to the destruction around me. Mother's bar, where Alex and I had stood moments ago, was a framework of burning timbers ready to fall. A woman screamed in the distance, her cries growing louder until I could make out her words. Alex's name rang in my ears. However, I was the one shouting for him. I was that woman. Once I realized what I was doing, I stopped yelling. Alex, my Alex, could not be dead. Yet if he was still trapped inside the bar, he'd never survive. The mist-filled place where he held me wasn't real. And in the denial of my heart-wrenching loss, I must have imagined his touch. A profound numbness swept over me, sucking away the will to live. Half a block away, the headless horseman reared his Frisian steed. The horse's hooves hit the asphalt in a shockwave of thunder, and a snort of fire burst from its flared nostrils. I was stunned the horseman was this far from Sleepy Hollow, and that he wasn't exactly headless. Within a high-colored cape, at the level of his neck, the outline of a face with black eyes stared back at me. It was encased in fire, with no discernible structure aside from part of a skull-like mask covering where the front of his head should have been. Everything about the horse and rider exuded the stench of death, yet they were neither living nor dead. The horseman raised his gloved hand, dug into the back of his inferno of a head, and formed a fiery ball that he threw in my direction. I didn't move or try to shift into my Lycoy state. The werewolf cat within me didn't stir. I had no energy left to defend myself, and I didn't care. If he killed me, then I could be with Alex again. I could be happy. Mother sprang between us and scooped me up like I was nothing more than a raggedy doll. I'm lean, but at 5'9", I'm not at all doll-like. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" he said. I didn't answer. Cradled in his arms this way, I felt small and protected. Mother could easily be a linebacker. I had no doubt he'd barrel through any obstacle to get me to safety. He sprinted toward the alley where I kept my Harley, Miss Kitty, just as the fireball exploded in the spot where I'd lain, sending a ripple of heat cascading down the street at us. The headless horseman roared a curse, but Mother paid him no heed and kept running. I glanced back at the rider, whose steed stomped furiously in place while its master held the reins taut. The horseman defied all stories of his ties to Sleepy Hollow by traveling 90 miles north to seek the other part of his skull mask. The legend said he was a Hessian soldier whose head had been blown off during the battle at White Plains, and each year he rose in search of his former human head.